As far as you can see in any direction that you look, there isn't a plant, tree, or animal that is older than this man. Why, he's as old as the hills. Now I get that saying, because as I was writing this and looking around, I realized only the mountains are older than my guest on today's episode. So we're happy to do something unusual on Held by Legends, Signed by Heroes, and that's give a player's date of birth. I've only done this a few times and it was close to or on the player's birthday. My format is just to give the player's MLB debut date, which is more pertinent to the show. I only give exact dates if a player was the first or the last to do something, and certain milestones and anniversaries. But I've started this new thing. It's not a theme, and it's not a segment. More a statement of fact when I say, on this day. It's a way for me to preface what I'm about to say is important. And I give the date of birth because this big leaguer is still with us today at the age of 96, and we can get his take on baseball now and 75 years ago, back in 1948, when he first started out. And we can ask him about how he pitched Jackie Robinson and Ted Williams, or we can ask him about seeing himself on his 1952 Topps card for the first time wearing a big league uniform. Or what I would ask Mr. Kelly, you've been on this big blue marble for nearly a century. What decade would you like to go back to? This segment profiles the players who signed my dad's autograph book or programs, in many cases both. I talk about their careers through story-driven episodes and less on stats, which can bog down a story. Stats vary over the years and eras anyway. Some of the players I talk about were born in the 1800s and some are with us today, like the man of the moment. Me, I look at what a player did and who he did it against, and keep the focus on the player's highs and lows and personal stories that I read about or my dad told me. I'll look up a player to see which team he was on, and today's player spent time with the Seattle Rainiers and is on the roster lineup in a 1955 Seals scorebook. That's most likely when my dad met and got an autograph from Robert Edward Kelly, nicknamed Bob, or his manager Frankie Frisch used to call him Bases on Balls Bob. Pitcher, MLB debut 1951 from Cleveland, Ohio. Born October 4th, 1927, and you know when I give the date of birth, it's part of my new theme, which is to focus on former big leaguers who are still with us today. Why I didn't do this sooner? Don't know. So let's hear what Bob Kelly had to say about his Uncle Carl, who pitched in the pros and played catch with Bob when he was still in his playpen. Or as a kid, when he was asked what he wants to be when he grows up, Bob said, from the get-go, I said, I want to be a ball player. He would lead East Cleveland's Shaw High School to a state title in 1944 and would attend Purdue University and was a Boilermaker pitcher for 2 seasons, and then switched schools and pitched for Western Reserve University. He started his pro career in 1948 and would pitch 4 seasons in the Big Show, 3 with the Chicago Cubs in the early 50s, going 7-4 as a rookie in 1951. Bob Kelly was traded to the Redlegs halfway through the 1953 season before spending the next 4 years in the minors. 1956 and 1957, Bob was what's called, if you're a pitcher, a workhorse, hurling over 250 innings each year in the Southern Association League. That's Double-A. Winning 24 games in 1957. He'd make one more appearance in the majors with the Cleveland Indians in 1958 before retiring. This is Bob Kelly talking. Instead of the Cubs giving me a signing bonus in 1948, they gave me a pro contract, which came with an invite to spring training camp. One of my very first roommates at camp was Andy Pavko. He was a really nice guy. And I was close friends with Wayne Terwilliger and Cal McClish for many years. And we all lived in the same house as Turk Lone. When I was on the Reds, we had a reliever named Frank Smith. Man, was he crazy. For a while, he was tying his left shoe real loose, and when he'd go into his windup, he'd kick off his shoe to distract the batter who didn't know what was going on. I love baseball stories. Mr. Bob Kelly is the last surviving major leaguer to have been managed by Rogers, Hornsby, and Frankie Frisch. Bob says it was Frankie who gave him his shot in the majors and said Roger Hornsby was the worst manager he ever played for and doesn't even like to say his name. Saying that, he didn't know how to treat people and had a big ego. As a major leaguer, Bob Kelly pitched in both leagues and got to play in all the famous parks and has many stories about pitching against and watching some of the greats in baseball history play ball. Here's a story I will tell you since Bob doesn't like talking about Rogers Hornsby. One time, Bob Kelly and some of his Redlegs teammates left their hotel in Philadelphia, caught a cab to Shibe Park to watch the Phillies hit batting practice. And who was there early? Rogers Hornsby. Only problem was he was down in the Phillies' batting cage giving them tips. Bob said, "We couldn't believe it. Our manager was helping them, and he was just loving all the attention." Old as the hills. Bob Kelly is the last and winningest MLB player to come out of Cleveland, Ohio's Case Western Reserve University, and he's the second winningest pitcher out of Purdue. One source says Bob pitched in Puerto Rico. I'll have to ask Mr. Kelly if he was that source.